terminal erupted in chaos as Max lunged forward, his guttural barks echoing off the high ceilings. The pregnant woman froze, white shopping bags trembling in her grip. "Please, officer, I'm pregnant," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "Make him stop." Travelers scattered, heads whipped around. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. "Ma'am, I need you to stay calm," Officer Mark Henderson shouted, the leash cutting into his wrist as he fought to control his canine partner. Max had never behaved like this before. The woman's face drained of color. "What does he want from me? I haven't done anything wrong." But Max didn't relent. His barks grew more frantic, more desperate, like he was screaming a warning that only he could understand. Minutes later, when the horrifying truth finally came to light, it shattered everything Mark thought he knew. Because what Max detected wasn't just a crime. It was a life-or-death emergency, one that no human eye could have spotted. And what was hidden beneath that calm, composed exterior would haunt the airport terminal forever. Before we dive in, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And I'm really curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories reach. The International Airport Terminal hummed with the pulse of evening travel, the soft rumble of rolling suitcases, the distant beep of security scanners, the muffled announcements calling passengers to their gates. Overhead lights cast a warm glow across polished floors where travelers moved in predictable patterns, each focused on their own journey. Officer Mark Henderson adjusted his belt, his eyes sweeping the bustling space with practiced vigilance. To everyone else, this was just another routine evening. But for Mark, every shift meant staying sharp because threats rarely announced themselves. Beside him walked his trusted canine partner, Max, a powerfully built German shepherd with intelligent dark eyes and an air of calm confidence that commanded respect. Max's ears swiveled constantly, picking up every sound, every shift in the atmosphere. To Mark, he wasn't just a working dog. He was a brother in uniform. They had been partners for 5 years, a bond sealed through countless successful operations, tense standoffs, and quiet moments of unspoken trust. Mark reached down, running his hand along Max's neck. "Just another patrol, buddy. Nice and easy," he said softly. Max's tail gave a brief wag, acknowledging the familiar reassurance. Around them, families hurried toward check-in counters. Business travelers typed furiously on laptops. A child squealed as her mother chased her near a coffee kiosk. An announcement crackled overhead about a gate change for a flight to Dubai. The atmosphere felt routine, almost mundane, but calm never lasted long in places like this. Max suddenly stopped mid-stride, his body tensing. Mark noticed immediately but didn't overreact. Airports carried thousands of scents: perfume, food, cleaning chemicals. Max caught them all. Still, something about the dog's posture made Mark's instincts flicker to life. He learned long ago to trust Max's alerts. They'd prevented disasters before. He straightened, scanning the crowd. Tourists clutching boarding passes. Elderly couples moving slowly. Young professionals scrolling through phones. Nothing stood out yet. Max's head turned sharply toward the departure gates, his nose working the air. Mark frowned. "What have you got, partner?" he murmured. Max let out a low rumbling growl, barely audible over the terminal noise. Then just as quickly his muscles relaxed and his tail flicked once. Mark exhaled, a slight smile crossing his face. "You're keeping me honest, aren't you?" He couldn't have known. Within seconds, that peaceful evening would explode into a crisis. Max's next move wouldn't just stop the crowd. It would expose a nightmare hiding in plain sight. Mark glanced at his watch. 7:34 p.m. The evening rush was in full swing. Passengers streamed toward security checkpoints in steady waves, their conversations blending into white noise. Max walked beside him with disciplined focus, his nose constantly analyzing the shifting currents of air. The dog's composure never wavered, even when chaos swirled around them. Then amid the flowing sea of travelers, something changed. A woman entered through the main doors, and Mark's attention caught on her without him quite knowing why. She was tall, blonde hair falling past her shoulders, wearing a dark navy coat over a white blouse that stretched tight across her visibly pregnant belly. Dark jeans and flat shoes completed the practical travel outfit. In each hand, she carried crisp white shopping bags that swayed with each deliberate step. Sunglasses hid her eyes despite the indoor lighting, and her jaw was clenched as though she were concentrating hard on something. Mark watched her reflexively. Something in her movements felt off, disconnected from the relaxed flow of the other passengers. Mark had learned to trust Max in ways that defied logic. 5 years of partnership had taught him that the dog's nose was more reliable than any scanner, any X-ray machine, any piece of technology the airport could deploy. Max had detected things that should have been impossible. Trace amounts of explosives sealed in triple-layered containers, narcotics hidden in false-bottom suitcases lined with coffee grounds, even a handgun disassembled and distributed across 4 different bags. The dog's success rate was flawless. Not once had Max given a false alert. Not once had he missed a genuine threat. That kind of track record wasn't luck. It was instinct refined by thousands of hours of training, an olfactory system so sophisticated it could detect 1 part per trillion, like finding a single grain of sand on a beach that stretched for miles. Mark had watched Max work through crowds of hundreds, isolating a single individual carrying contraband while everyone else passed by unnoticed. He'd seen the dog freeze mid-step, his entire body going rigid, every muscle locked on a target that Mark's own senses couldn't begin to perceive. But the bond went deeper than professional respect. Max wasn't just a tool. He was a partner who'd saved Mark's life during a midnight raid gone wrong, taking down an armed suspect before the man could fire. He was the presence that made long, quiet nights at the airport bearable. The warm weight pressed against his leg during breaks. The intelligent eyes that seemed to understand every word Mark spoke, even when no commands were given. They'd shared countless shifts, weathered tense moments together, celebrated seizures that made headlines. Max knew Mark's moods, could sense when his handler was stressed or tired, would lean in just a little closer as if offering silent reassurance. Mark remembered the first time he doubted one of Max's alerts. It was 2 years ago, during a busy holiday rush. Max had flagged an elderly woman with a walker, her frail frame and kind smile making the alert seem absurd. Mark had hesitated, feeling foolish as he asked her to step aside. She'd protested tearfully, calling it harassment. But protocol demanded he follow through. Inside her carry-on, beneath knitted sweaters and pill bottles, they'd found 2 kilograms of heroin. The woman was a courier, paid handsomely to exploit her innocent appearance. Mark never forgot that moment, never forgot the lesson it burned into him. Trust the dog. Always trust the dog. Even when your eyes tell you otherwise. Even when your gut screams that something doesn't make sense. Even when every logical part of your brain insists you're about to make a terrible mistake. Max's instincts weren't human. They operated on a level Mark could never fully access or understand. And that was exactly why they worked so well together. Mark brought judgment, procedure, and authority. Max brought an ability to detect truth that no amount of human cleverness could match. As the blonde woman moved closer to the security checkpoint, Mark felt Max's body tense again beside him. This time, the tension didn't fade. The woman moved through the terminal with calculated precision, each step measured and deliberate. She was striking in an understated way, tall and composed, her blonde hair catching in the overhead lights as it fell in smooth waves past her shoulders. The navy coat she wore was expensive, well-tailored, the kind of garment that suggested taste and means. Beneath it, her white blouse stretched across her pregnant belly. The fabric pulled taut in a way that should have looked natural, but somehow didn't. The dark sunglasses remained firmly in place despite the artificial lighting, hiding her eyes and half her expression. Mark found himself studying her face, what little he could see of it. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, not quite a smile, not quite neutral. There was a rigidity to her jaw, a tension that belied the casual traveler image she was clearly trying to project. But it was her hands that caught Mark's attention most. They gripped the white shopping bags with an intensity that seemed excessive, knuckles pale against the crisp paper handles. The bags weren't heavy, they swayed with her movement, clearly containing something lightweight. Yet she held them as though they might escape if she loosened her grip, even slightly. No casual shopper carried bags like that. No pregnant woman navigating an airport with that kind of physical burden would maintain such an iron grip unless those bags contained something far more important than clothes or souvenirs. Her posture was equally wrong. Most pregnant women Mark had observed in the terminal moved with a certain looseness, one hand often resting protectively on their belly. Their gait slightly altered by the shifted center of gravity. This woman walked stiffly, almost mechanically, as though moving through a choreographed routine she'd rehearsed but not quite perfected. Her spine was too straight, her steps too controlled. There was no natural sway, no adjustment of weight. She looked like someone playing a role rather than living it. Max's focus was absolute. His entire body had oriented toward her, his head lowered slightly, nose working the air in rapid, shallow sniffs. His ears were pinned forward, tail rigid and unmoving. Mark had seen this stance before, but never with this intensity. The dog wasn't just alerting. He was locked on, every fiber of his being concentrated on the woman's midsection, tracking her movement with an unwavering fixation that sent ice through Mark's veins. The woman drew closer, heading toward the departure gates where crowds thickened near the security checkpoint. She didn't glance at Max or Mark, didn't acknowledge their presence at all, but something in her carefully maintained composure suggested awareness. She knew she was being watched. She was simply choosing not to react. Mark's hand tightened on Max's leash. The dog's breathing had changed, faster and shallower. A low whine built in his throat, almost inaudible beneath the ambient noise of the terminal. Then Max's body coiled, muscles bunching beneath his coat. Mark knew what was coming. He braced himself. Max exploded forward. The leash burned across Mark's palm as Max surged toward the woman, his barks deafening in the confined space of the terminal. Travelers scattered, parents pulling children back, businessmen stumbling over their luggage. The woman stopped abruptly, her eyes widening behind the dark sunglasses, shopping bags swinging wildly in her grip. "Please," she cried out, her voice cracking with what sounded like genuine fear. "Officer, please make him stop. I'm pregnant." Her free hand moved protectively to her belly, the universal gesture of maternal instinct. "What's wrong with your dog? I haven't done anything." Mark fought to control Max, the dog's powerful body straining against the leash with a desperation Mark had never witnessed before. This wasn't a standard detection alert. This was something primal, urgent, almost frantic. Max's barks had taken on a quality that made Mark's skin crawl. They sounded almost human, like screams of warning. Security personnel rushed over, radios crackling with urgent chatter. The crowd had formed a wide circle around them. Dozens of smartphones raised and recording. Mark's mind raced through the optics of the situation. A K9 attacking a visibly pregnant woman. The headlines wrote themselves. His career could end in the next 60 seconds if he made the wrong call. But Max didn't make mistakes. "Ma'am, I need you to come with me," Mark said, his voice steady despite the chaos. He pulled Max back, the dog fighting him every inch. "This is a disgrace!" Sarah's voice rose, tears streaming down her cheeks now. Real tears, or at least they looked real. "I'm 7 months pregnant, and you're treating me like a criminal. I'll have your badge for this." The threat hit Mark like a physical blow, but he held firm. "Ma'am, it's just a routine secondary screening. Please come with me voluntarily, or I'll have to insist. I want to speak to your supervisor." "This is harassment." She looked around at the crowd, playing to them, her voice trembling with indignation. "Is anyone seeing this? A pregnant woman being terrorized." Several travelers nodded sympathetically. Mark heard murmurs of disapproval. His stomach twisted, but Max's continued frenzy left him no choice. The dog was practically climbing Mark's leg, trying to reach her, whining between barks, a sound of absolute desperation. "Now, ma'am." 2 airport security officers flanked them as Mark guided Sarah toward a private screening room near the back of the security area. She walked stiffly, her protest continuing in a stream of tearful accusations. The shopping bags remained clutched in her white-knuckle grip. Max couldn't follow into the screening room. Protocol demanded the dog remain outside during sensitive searches. As Mark handed the leash to another officer, Max's demeanor shifted from aggressive to panicked. He pulled against the restraint, whining desperately, pacing back and forth in front of the closed door. His claws scraped against the polished floor, his whines escalating to sharp, anguished barks that echoed through the corridor. Inside the room, Sarah stood rigidly, her chest heaving, sunglasses finally removed to reveal red-rimmed eyes. Mark took a breath and began his questions, but he couldn't shake the sound of Max's desperate cries bleeding through the door. The screening room was small and sterile, fluorescent lights humming overhead, casting harsh shadows across the plain white walls. A single metal table stood in the center, 2 chairs positioned on opposite sides. Sarah remained standing near the door, her white shopping bag still clutched in her hands, her breathing rapid and shallow. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to have a seat," Mark said, gesturing to one of the chairs. His voice was calm, professional, though his heart hammered against his ribs. Outside, Max's whining continued, a constant, nerve-shredding soundtrack to the encounter. Sarah didn't move at first. She stood there trembling, and Mark noticed immediately that the shaking wasn't the kind that came from fear or anger. It was something else, something deeper. Her jaw quivered. Sweat beaded along her hairline despite the cool air conditioning. Her skin had taken on a grayish pallor that made her look suddenly ill. "Please, sit down," Mark repeated, softer this time. She moved mechanically to the chair and lowered herself into it, the motion awkward and stiff. The shopping bags hung from her fingers like anchors she couldn't release. Mark pulled out a notepad, the gesture routine, meant to establish normalcy in an abnormal situation. "Can you tell me your name?" "Sarah," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Sarah Mitchell." "Where are you traveling today, Sarah?" "Dubai." The word came out strangled, forced. Visiting family." Mark nodded, jotting down notes he wasn't really reading. His attention was split between her face and her hands. "Can I ask what's in the bags?" Sarah's eyes darted down to the shopping bags as though she'd forgotten they existed. Just clothes, gifts, things for the trip." Her grip tightened impossibly further, the paper handles crinkling under the pressure. "Would you mind if I took a look?" She hesitated, her whole body tensing. Yes, I mind. You have no right." As she spoke, she shifted in the chair, trying to cross her legs. The movement was too quick, too sharp. One of the shopping bags swung outward, tilting at an angle. For just a fraction of a second, the overhead light caught something deep inside the bag's interior. A glint. Silver. Metallic. Mark's eyes locked onto it. The bag's lining should have been opaque, just simple brown paper, But through a small tear near the bottom seam, he could see something else. Something wrapped in what looked like aluminum foil, packed tightly, deliberately concealed beneath a layer of tissue paper and fabric. His pulse quickened. That wasn't clothes. That wasn't gifts. Sarah noticed his gaze and immediately jerked the bag upright, repositioning it against her leg. But the damage was done. Mark had seen it. Aaron, now the air in the room felt different, charged with an unspoken understanding that everything had just changed. Sarah, Mark said slowly, his hand moving instinctively toward his radio. I'm going to need you to place those bags on the table. Her face crumpled. Please, she whispered. Please, you don't understand. Then she gasped, a sharp, agonized sound that cut through the room like a blade. Her hand flew to her abdomen, clutching it with sudden, terrifying intensity. Sarah's entire body convulsed. The shopping bags tumbled from her grip, hitting the floor with a muted thud as her hands pressed desperately against her swollen belly. Her face contorted into a mask of pure agony, mouth opening in a silent scream that never found voice. Sweat poured down her temples, her skin shifting from gray to a ghastly white. Sarah? Mark moved toward her instinctively, his hand reaching out. What's happening? She couldn't answer. Her breathing came in rapid, shallow gasps, each one more labored than the last. Her eyes rolled back slightly, unfocused, lost in whatever hell was consuming her from within. She doubled over in the chair, then slid sideways, her legs giving out completely. Mark lunged forward, catching her before her head hit the metal table edge. I need medical! Now! He shouted toward the door, his voice cracking with urgency. Sarah crumpled in his arms, her full weight collapsing against him as he lowered her to the floor. She writhed, back arching, fingers clawing at her abdomen as though trying to tear through the fabric of her blouse. The sound that finally escaped her throat was inhuman, a low, guttural moan of suffering that made Mark's blood run cold. This wasn't labor. This was something far worse. Stay with me, Sarah, Mark said, his training kicking in even as panic clawed at his chest. He pressed his radio. This is Officer Henderson in Secondary Screening Room 3. I need paramedics immediately. Female, approximately 30 years old, pregnant, severe abdominal distress. She's going into shock. The door burst open. 2 security officers rushed in, followed seconds later by an airport paramedic carrying a medical kit. Outside, Max's frantic barking reached a fever pitch, the dog throwing himself against whoever was restraining him. Sarah's eyes found Mark's for just a moment, and in them he saw something that shattered every assumption he'd made. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't defiance. It was pure, absolute terror. The terror of someone who knew exactly what was happening to her body and understood there might be no coming back from it. It hurts, she managed to gasp between labored breaths. Oh God, it hurts so much. The paramedic dropped to his knees beside her, fingers immediately searching for a pulse. Pulse is rapid and weak, pupils dilated. Ma'am, can you tell me what you're feeling? Where's the pain? Inside, she choked out, her voice breaking. It's burning. Inside. Mark stepped back, giving the medical team room to work. His mind raced, pieces of a terrible puzzle clicking into place. Max's desperate barking, the metallic glint in the bag, Sarah's unnatural stiffness, the way she'd been walking. This wasn't about what she was carrying in those shopping bags. This was about what she was carrying inside her body. We need to transport now, the paramedic shouted, already radioing for an ambulance. Possible internal rupture. Get a gurney here. Sarah's screams filled the small room as her body convulsed again, and Mark realized with horrifying clarity that Max hadn't been trying to stop a criminal. He'd been trying to save her life, and they might already be too late. The hospital waiting room smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. Mark paced the narrow corridor outside the emergency surgical wing, his boots squeaking against the linoleum floor. It had been 2 hours since the ambulance screamed away from the airport, sirens wailing, Sarah's agonized cries still echoing in his ears. 2 hours of pacing, of second-guessing, of replaying every moment from the terminal. Max had known. Somehow, impossibly, Max had known. The double doors swung open with a pneumatic hiss. The lead surgeon emerged, still wearing his surgical cap, mask pulled down to reveal a face that looked 10 years older than it probably was. His scrubs were marked with dark stains. His expression was grave, eyes carrying the weight of something he clearly wished he hadn't seen. Mark stopped mid-stride. "Is she?" "She's alive," the surgeon said, but there was no relief in his voice. "Stable for now. But Officer Henderson, I need to show you something." He gestured toward a nearby consultation room. Mark followed, his stomach twisting into knots. Inside, the surgeon pulled up images on a computer screen, ultrasound scans, cross-sections that looked alien and wrong. "When we first examined her, we expected to find a fetus in distress," the surgeon began, his voice clinical but strained. "What we found instead," he paused, seeming to gather himself. "There was no pregnancy, no fetus, no amniotic fluid." Mark stared at him, not comprehending. "What do you mean, no pregnancy? She was wearing a prosthetic." The surgeon pulled up another image, this one from the surgery itself. Mark's breath caught. A custom-made silicone abdominal cavity, surgically implanted beneath the skin and muscle tissue. Highly sophisticated, it was designed to look and feel exactly like a pregnant belly from the outside. The room tilted. Mark gripped the edge of the desk. Why would someone? Because it was filled with this. The surgeon gestured to another photograph. Clear plastic bags, dozens of them, filled with a viscous amber liquid. Several had ruptured, their contents leaking into the cavity. High-concentration liquid narcotics, probably synthetic opioids, though we won't have the full toxicology report for a few hours. When one of the bags ruptured, the drug began seeping into her bloodstream through the surgical incision sites. That's what caused the collapse. Mark felt sick. She was smuggling drugs inside her body? Not just smuggling. This was an internal transportation system. The rupture was causing organ failure. Another 30 minutes and she would have died from toxic shock. The surgeon's eyes met Mark's. Your dog saved her life, officer. I don't know how he detected the rupture, but without that alert, she never would have made it to us in time. The weight of it crashed over Mark like a wave. Max's frantic barking, the desperate lunging. It hadn't been about detecting contraband. It had been a warning. A life-or-death emergency that only the dog's incredible nose could sense. The chemical signature of ruptured drugs flooding Sarah's system, poisoning her from within. Where is she now? Mark asked, his voice hoarse. Recovery? Under guard, as you requested. She'll survive, but she's going to need extensive surgery to remove the implant safely. Mark nodded numbly, already pulling out his phone to call headquarters. This wasn't just a drug bust anymore. This was something far more horrifying. Mark sat beside Sarah's hospital bed 3 hours later, the steady beep of monitors filling the silence between them. She looked small now, diminished, the bravado and carefully constructed facade completely stripped away. A fluid line snaked from her arms. Her face was gaunt, eyes sunken and ringed with dark circles. But she was alive. They'll kill me, she whispered, her voice barely audible above the medical equipment. Her gaze remained fixed on the ceiling, refusing to meet Mark's eyes. When they find out I survived, when they know I'm talking to you, they'll kill me. Mark leaned forward, keeping his voice gentle. We can protect you, Sarah, but I need you to tell me everything. A tear slipped down her cheek. For a long moment she said nothing. Then slowly, the words began to flow. His name is Victor. Victor Castellanos. Her hands trembled beneath a thin hospital blanket. I met him 6 months ago at a club in Miami. He was charming, sophisticated. I thought he actually cared about me. How did he recruit you? He didn't. Not at first. He waited, built trust. Then one night he told me about his business opportunity. $20,000 for a single trip to Dubai. All I had to do was carry a package. She laughed bitterly, the sound hollow. I was drowning in student debt. I thought it would be drugs in a suitcase, maybe hidden in luggage. I never imagined. Her voice broke. Mark waited, letting her compose herself. The surgery was in a clinic outside Tijuana. They put me under, and when I woke up, I was pregnant. Except I wasn't. Fresh tears streamed down her face. They told me it was safe, that the bags were triple sealed, that nothing could go wrong. But something did go wrong. I felt it rupture during the flight to the airport. Just a pop, like something tearing inside. Then the burning started. She finally looked at him, her eyes desperate. I tried to act normal. I thought if I could just make it through security, get on the plane, maybe I'd be okay. But your dog, Max saved your life, Mark said quietly. Sarah nodded, more tears falling. I know, and now they'll know I failed. Mark pulled out his notepad. You said Victor. Where can we find him? He watches. He always watches. Her voice dropped to a terrified whisper. He was at the airport tonight, waiting to make sure I got through. When your dog stopped me, when they took me away, he would have seen everything. Mark's pulse quickened. Is he still there? No, but there's another girl. Tomorrow night, same time. She's supposed to fly to Istanbul. Sarah's fingers clutched the blanket. He uses a contact at the car rental desk near Terminal B. A woman named Elena. She gives him updates, tells him when security shifts change. That's how he times everything. Mark was already standing, phone in hand. What does this other girl look like? I don't know. I never met her. But Victor will be there. He never misses a run. Sarah's voice cracked. Please, you have to stop him. Stop all of them before they do this to someone else. Mark squeezed her hand briefly. We will. He was already calling for backup before he left the room. The airport terminal felt different the next evening. To the casual observer, nothing had changed. The same crowds, the same announcements, the same rhythm of travel. But beneath the surface, the entire operation was a carefully orchestrated trap. Mark stood near the car rental desks in Terminal B, his hand resting lightly on Max's back. The dog sat alert but calm, ears rotating like radar dishes, processing the thousands of scents flowing through the ventilation system. Around them, disguised as travelers and airline staff, were 15 undercover officers. Federal agents monitored security feeds from a command center upstairs. Every exit was covered, every escape route blocked. Elena, the woman behind the rental counter, had been quietly arrested an hour earlier. A female agent now sat in her place, wearing Elena's uniform, her earpiece hidden beneath carefully styled hair. Target spotted, the agent's voice crackled through Mark's earpiece. Pregnant female, early 20s, brown hair, gray coat, coming through the main entrance now. Mark's eyes found her immediately. She moved with the same unnatural stiffness Sarah had displayed, the same rigid posture, the same death grip on her carry-on luggage. Her face was composed, but her eyes betrayed her, darting, nervous, scanning the crowd with barely concealed fear. Max, Mark whispered, seek. The German shepherd's demeanor shifted instantly. His nose lifted, working the air currents, isolating scents with the precision of a surgeon. He took 3 steps forward, then stopped. His entire body went rigid, tail stiff, ears pinned forward. He'd found her, but Mark held him back. They needed Victor first. Secondary target, another voice reported. Male, 40s, black leather jacket, standing near baggage claim carousel 3. Matches the description. Mark's pulse hammered. Victor, it had to be. Move in on my signal, Mark commanded. Let's get both of them. The pregnant woman approached the security checkpoint, her movements mechanical. Mark released Max, and the dog moved like lightning, cutting through the crowd with purpose. The woman saw him coming and froze, her face draining of color. Max barked once, sharp, commanding. The woman's legs buckled. Get her, Mark shouted, and 2 officers converged, catching her before she fell. At the same moment, 4 agents closed in on the man near baggage claim. Victor saw them coming and bolted, shoving through travelers, heading for the exit. But he'd made a critical mistake. He'd positioned himself too far from any real escape route. An agent tackled him near the automatic doors, driving him to the ground. Victor struggled, cursing in Spanish, but within seconds he was face down, hands zip-tied behind his back. Mark arrived moments later as agents searched Victor's pockets. A satellite phone, forged passport, a one-way ticket to Bogota, leaving in 90 minutes. In a small black notebook filled with names, dates, and flight numbers, the entire operation documented in meticulous detail. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Victor snarled, blood trickling from his split lip. Mark knelt beside him, Max at his side. Actually, we do now, thanks to your mistakes. Victor's expression faltered as he saw the notebook in the agent's hands. The realization hit him. It was over. The ring was broken. The nightmare was finished. Max sat calmly, his job complete, as officers led both suspects away in handcuffs. The story broke within hours. By morning, news vans lined the perimeter of the airport. Satellite dishes pointed skyward, reporters speaking urgently into cameras. The headlines flashed across screens worldwide. K9 hero saves smuggler's life. Police dog detects internal drug rupture. Max, the German shepherd who saw what humans couldn't. Mark stood in the airport's press conference room, uncomfortable in his dress uniform, facing a sea of cameras and microphones. Beside him, Max sat perfectly still, his posture dignified, seemingly oblivious to the attention. But Mark noticed the slight twitch of his ear every time a camera flash went off. Officer Henderson, a reporter called out, can you explain how Max detected something that no security scanner could find? Mark glanced down at his partner, then back at the crowd. Max has what no machine could ever replicate, instinct refined by millions of years of evolution. He didn't just smell the drugs. He smelled the chemical signature of a medical emergency, a rupture that was poisoning Sarah Mitchell from the inside. That level of detection, that kind of intelligence, it saved her life. Will Max receive any special recognition? Max doesn't care about medals or recognition, Mark said, a slight smile crossing his face. He cares about doing his job, about protecting people. That's what makes him extraordinary. More questions flew, but Mark's attention drifted. He thought about that moment in the terminal when Max had lunged forward, barking with a desperation Mark had never witnessed. Every instinct had told him to doubt the dog, to trust his eyes over Max's nose. But 5 years of partnership had taught him better. Trust the dog. Always trust the dog. The press conference ended. The cameras packed up. The reporters dispersed to file their stories. And finally, Mark and Max were alone in the quiet corridor outside the conference room. Mark knelt down, his knees cracking slightly. Max's tail began to wag, the first genuine emotion the dog had shown all day. Mark reached out, scratching behind Max's ears, that favorite spot that always made the dog's eyes half close in contentment. You did good, boy, Mark whispered. You did real good. Max leaned into the touch, a soft grunt of acknowledgement rumbling in his chest. In that moment, words weren't necessary. They'd worked together long enough that understanding passed between them without language. A bond forged through trust, through countless shifts, through moments of danger and triumph. Sarah Mitchell was alive because Max had refused to be ignored. The second mule was safe because Max had identified her instantly. Victor's network was dismantled because one German shepherd had instincts that transcended human comprehension. Mark stood, and Max rose with him. They walked together through the terminal, past travelers who pointed and whispered, past security personnel who nodded with respect. The airport buzzed with the normal rhythm of travel, but everyone who worked there knew the truth. Max wasn't just a K-9 officer, he was a legend. The dog who had barked desperately when no one understood why. The dog who had warned them all when it seemed too late. The hero with 4 paws who had proven once again that sometimes the greatest wisdom comes not from technology or training, but from trusting the instincts of a partner who would never let you down. Mark scratched Max's head one more time as they headed toward the exit. "Come on, partner, let's go home." If you like this video and want to see more, just like it, then make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And I'm genuinely curious. Where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far these incredible stories reach.